Are we actually about to lose third-party control for Bambu machines? On January 16th, Bambu released a blog post discussing a new authorization system. This would be in an effort to make their machines and ecosystem as a whole more secure. But what does that mean for the third-party products like the BigTree Panda Touch, for example? And more importantly, what does it mean for software stuff like OrcaSlicer? Alright, very quickly, Bambu released a lot of information regarding the new authorization system that they're going to be implementing to secure their machines. They're effectively stepping up the requirements or changing the protocols enacted to keep their machines more secure. And these new requirements are going to affect the web-based stuff as well as the LAN-based machines. So of course, those of us that are communicating with our machines over the air through Wi-Fi, we're going to see a difference here. But also those that are wired in doing print farm stuff will not be exempt from these new protocols to step up the security. And that's due to the possibility of vulnerabilities in that network, as well as the possibility of wireless networks being vulnerable, and they go into detail on that. But this is largely an internal update. The trouble is it's going to drastically change how these machines interact with a lot of things that the consumers interact with. Because now everything's going to have different authorization requirements in order to interact with these machines. So here's a list of the functions that will need the new authorization in order to communicate with the machine. Because they will require Bambu authorization, these are not going to be available for third-party units to access, i.e. OrcaSlicer, Panda Touch, Home Assistant, things like that. So, needing new authorization, we've got binding and unbinding printers, starting remote video access, initializing firmware upgrades, initializing a print job, LAN or wireless, controlling the motion system in any way. All of those things mentioned will require this new level of authorization, and as such, the third-party stuff is not going to have access. But don't worry, there's also stuff that doesn't require the new level of authorization. Let me go over that list. That's much less impressive. You don't need authorization to check things like status information on the printer, starting print jobs that are already loaded onto the SD card of the machine. And then there's a part that says general operations listed outside of what was previously stated. Thanks. So, for a quick summary, for example, if you use the Panda Touch to start all your machines, we've gone over how you can do batch printing and print farm stuff with one Panda Touch, where you start several machines, up to 10 at once. Not anymore! No siree. Not gonna happen. But also, if you're trying to send a print to your X1 Carbon, for example, using OrcaSlicer instead of Bambu Studio, nah, you don't get to do that either. Maybe all those people that used to say, Bambu's such a closed system, it's a bad idea, it's not open source, maybe they were right. From the beginning, when Bambu came onto the scene, the primary criticism that everybody liked to bring up was the fact that Bambu is a closed ecosystem. Everything's proprietary, even though it's based on open source findings and research from previous years of innovation. Every part on their machine's proprietary. You're not putting the same nozzles in them, you're not using the same build plates that you would normally use on other printers. It's all Bambu stuff. So any of the commonly universal hardware at the time is kind of nullified if you go straight to a Bambu machine. Well, luckily, since then, there's been a thriving aftermarket that's erupted from the Bambu's performance and general well-reception in the community. The walled garden that Bambu was putting up seemed to be a problem at first, but ended up being totally manageable. Everybody moved on with their lives. And in this specific instance, there's actually a lot of reasons why Bambu's closed ecosystem approach became super successful. I mean, even talking about the proprietary parts, that's kind of a scary thing because you have to rely on Bambu. But straight off the bat, Bambu is providing replacements for these parts in stock on their website, and they were at a reasonable price. And that was kind of an optimistic first look on how they were going to run their ecosystem, especially at the beginning when nobody really knew what to expect from this new company. Something else they've done well from the beginning was their filament presets. Having a small catalog of machines, especially starting out, really allowed Bambu to tune in all of their filaments, and that allowed for creators to use the machine to print stuff instead of tinker with the machine, which was quite a big shift at the time. And that's what I like. I like that. Another example of Bambu's closed ecosystem working really well was actually the Bambu Studio slicer. It's their native slicer, but instead of it being like a reskinned version of Cura, like every other company was doing at the time, Bambu took Prusa slicer, kind of reskinned it, but also they totally rebuilt it. Like, it was completely tailored for the Bambu machines, and it even had a completely different layout and new features and all sorts of stuff to suit specifically what they were accomplishing with their machines. And then, of course, Bambu has this little thing called Maker World, if you've ever heard of it. Maker World's Bambu's 3D repository that seamlessly integrates with their slicer and with their machines. This was huge because combined with their app Bambu Handy, yes, it's called Bambu Handy, anyone could print files directly from their phone. No need to know how to slice models, no need to know what settings you have to use, no need to know how to design models. Everything was just right there, housed inside of the app, for anyone with a phone to begin printing. So the closed ecosystem really isn't that bad, right? Well, it's not exactly that simple. Let me explain. The downside of this approach is the reliance on Bambu. You don't have a choice. You have to rely on them to make these decisions for you, and you just hope that they're the correct decisions. And beyond that, in a lot of ways, the community still provides most of the aftercare and troubleshooting services, regardless of what brand we're speaking about. We did a video speaking about this more in depth if you want to check that out, but the same's true from Bambu in the experiences that have been shared with me, not in my personal experience. So getting help fixing your Bambu machine from the community instead of customer support is okay. That's kind of what we've been doing with 3D printers for a long time. But because the machines are so closed and so proprietary, it's definitely a lot more difficult to provide that support without being an employee of Bambu with access to their proprietary information. And unfortunately, we have to fully rely on customer service from Bambu. And if you've dealt with customer support from 3D printing companies before, you know why that's kind of a bummer. Now, beyond that, the closed system does provide issues with anything aftermarket that does come out for them. We've spoken about the BigTree Panda Touch a couple of times in this video, and that's the accessory I have the most experience with because I think it's a great product. But in the case of the Panda Touch, whenever there's a software update on my P1S, that gets pushed out. The Panda Touch kind of forgets how to do what it's supposed to do because now the machines aren't talking to each other correctly because Bambu just threw whatever new update out there. And then after a couple of days, it catches up and it knows what the new update says. It begins to communicate with the machine like it was supposed to, and everything kind of goes back to normal. But there's those couple of days of lag time. And so really you could just delay doing your software update and then BigTree will catch up and it won't be that big of an issue. And it's only a couple of day delay we're speaking about. But it's something that needs to be considered because it's an inconvenience that disrupts the workflow. But despite these difficulties that are inherent with such a closed machine, companies like BigTree Tech and E3D and a handful of others have an aftermarket that's thriving for these machines. But that's what we're speaking about today because that interaction, those relationships between these third-party devices and third-party softwares may be changing. So as I was reading the blog post, immediately there were alarm bells going off in my head. First thing that came to mind was Orca Slicer. If you're like me, Orca Slicer has completely taken over your workflow. Being able to have full control over your printer as well as sending G-code files or 3MFs to the machine and starting or stopping prints, all from your slicer, super huge. Great advantage. And that's something that's present both in Bambu Studio and Orca Slicer. But apparently with these new authorization protocols that are going to be enacted, Orca Slicer is not going to be able to do that anymore. It should be able to monitor the status of the machine like the blog post said, and allegedly it's going to be able to like turn on and off the LED light on the machine. But that's it. You're not starting any prints, you're completely changing your workflow. But all is not lost. It may seem extreme, but really it's not that big of a deal. Let me explain why. So as we read on in the blog post, Bambu's actually only mentioning one series of machines. From what I can tell, the only printers that are going to be affected by this new authorization protocol is the X series. So the X1 Carbon and the X1 Enterprise are the only things that are going to be changing the way they interact with third-party devices, allegedly. So in theory, my P1S is going to interact with Orca Slicer the same way it normally would. All of my A1 Minis should be unaffected. And accessories like my Panda Touch should have access to all of them like it normally does. So I guess this shouldn't really be an issue unless you're exclusively using the X series of printers. So here I am editing this video, and I realized right at the top of the article, it totally mentions that this update's starting with the X series, but it's going to be moving towards all of the printers. So, yes, it's beginning with the X series, but it's going to be happening to all the printers. As you were. But even beyond that, if you are only using the X series of printers, I still think this isn't that big of a deal. So let's rewind a little bit. If Bambu's changing their authorization protocol in such a way that third parties are not going to be able to interact with the machines, what does that mean for Bambu Studio? Bambu Studio and Orca Slicer are the same. Orca Slicer just has a lot more features and a lot more profiles for other printers besides Bambu stuff. But Orca Slicer is based on Bambu Studio. So if Bambu Studio is still going to be able to remain the same and function with the same workflow, communicate wirelessly, have access to the new authorization protocols, what's stopping Orca Slicer from doing the same thing? So in the FAQ section of the blog post, it does confirm that Bambu Studio and Bambu Handy are still going to have access to the machines. They're going to communicate. The experience is going to be largely uninterrupted. So what's stopping Orca Slicer from using this new protocol to gain access like they did with the old protocol? And really that's why I think this update isn't going to be as problematic as it maybe seemed as I was first reading the blog post. You see, currently Orca Slicer relies on the Bambu network plugin to operate and communicate with the Bambu machines. And that's the same network plugin that allows Bambu Studio to operate and communicate with the machines. Now, instead of that network plugin, Bambu's moving to this thing called Bambu Connect. That's the new authorization protocol that they're enacting. That's going to be the new conduit for all of the printer control stuff. Bambu Connect's more secure than the other Bambu network thing, so that's where we're going. So though the focus of the blog post kind of came off as we're losing third-party control for our machines, I think it can also be framed that we're updating our network plugin to be more secure. As a result, until the third party catches up to the new updated plugin, you're going to lose control. That make sense? And again, according to the FAQ section of that blog post, it sounds like Bambu's going to be offering their code to the Orca Slicer team, as well as generally working closely with their aftermarket partners to help them catch up to this updated protocol. They literally said it's going to be up to Orca Slicer to determine if they want to have the functionality to communicate with the machines, because they're giving them the code to do it. So again, it kind of sounds like this isn't a very big deal. The other big question a lot of people are having, though, is why is Bambu doing this in the first place? Well, according to the FAQ, it's all in the name of upgrading their security. Bambu goes on to cite several instances of there being attacks and extra load put on their cloud servers and things like that from unauthorized sources or generally nefarious dealings. And so really, if this is all just being done in the name of security, I feel like we don't have anything to worry about. And with any luck, the Orca Slicer team's gonna knock it out of the park like they normally do and just integrate the new plugin into Orca Slicer, and we're not gonna experience much of an interruption at all. From there, I imagine companies like BigTree Tech are gonna do the same thing. They'll get a hold of the updated information that they need to make sure their devices can communicate with this new authorization protocol, and that experience will likely be largely unaffected as well. And that's all I really care about, because BigTree Tech has so many cool things for Bambu machines. They have a whole line of products just for Bambu stuff. It's called the Panda line because pandas love bamboo. Check out all their stuff. I'm going to be reviewing some of it because it's super great. I sincerely love these products. So overall, I'm thinking this is going to likely be an uneventful transfer of power happening. The old network plugin's going to go, the new authorization protocol is going to be more secure, but it does raise some questions and generally reignites some of those initial fears. Bambu is a closed ecosystem, and ultimately we're at their mercy to make the decisions for us and hope that those decisions are good for the consumer. They can make changes like this whenever they want, and if we're relying on the third-party stuff or the aftermarket pieces to make our machine work, our machine may not work. So what do you think about this update? Is this a big deal, or is this ultimately going to be something we don't even hear anything about because it went so smoothly? Do you think they're doing it in the name of security, or is there something more at play? Get your conspiracies on in the comments or join us on Patreon. Bye!